Good morning. Welcome to Grand Round. So before we get started, important announcement. The FIFA World Cup is on Sunday. France versus Croatia. Go Blues. All right. Today's speaker is Dr. Andres Muelenaer. He is recently appointed Professor of Pediatrics as of 3 weeks ago, VTC SOM, and serves as the Chief of the Section of Pulmonology and Allergy here at Carilion. He is trained at Eastern Virginia Medical School with residency at William Beaumont Army Medical Center, fellowship at UNC Chapel Hill. He served in Operation Desert Storm, a stint at Duke and Fort Bragg, Germany, prior to joining the Carilion family in 1991. I think that makes him number 4, I think, oldest serving person behind Dr. Keys. He and Dr. Kraft and Dr. Gay. Yes. He has served in the past as the director of the Carilion Biomedical Institute and has worked closely with multiple graduate medical students and medical students as a co-research mentor. He is the teacher of a course in biomedical engineering and global societal ethics at Virginia Tech, Department of Biomedical Engineering. He is widely published, presented at every level, including multiple times internationally, the recipient of numerous contracts, grants, and involved in multiple clinical trials, and owns the patent on 2 biomedical devices. Please welcome Dr. Muelenaer to talk to us about team science.
Thank you. First of all, I just want to point out that Kraft is older than I am. So I entitled my talk today, Let's Do Some Team Science. I was supposed to do this in November, but another grand round that I'm participating in, one of my team science colleagues had to do a presentation in Texas, or she had some sort of excuse like that. So I accelerated my knowledge about team science. And what led me to do this is in one of my first meetings with Dr. Dunsmore, we were talking about the Department of Pediatrics and some of our goals, including being more engaged in research and other scholarly activities. And she, she said something about, well, we need to start out by doing team science. And I said, okay. And I'm thinking to myself, what in the heck is team science? So I ran back to my office and did a Google search and discovered that team science, in terms of being a real something that really exists, originated in oncology at NIH, and so then I figured it out. That's, she's right there, and but it intrigued me enough that I wanted to learn more about it. And a lot of what I'm saying today, and I have it on a slide somewhere, came from a really nice review article written by folks at NIH about team science. There is a science of team science. This has been well studied, and I think it's something that we should think about. I have no financial interest or relationships with any commercial companies or manufacturers, and I'm not going to talk about anything like that today anyway. So at the end of this session, I'd like for you to be able to at least, defining team science for me, it's been difficult. It's kind of squishy at times. I'm going to talk about the characteristics of an effective team. There are stages of development that have been proposed to have effective teams. And I want us to really think about how we can apply some of these principles to clinical medicine and how we intermesh providing excellent clinical service to the communities here in Southwest Virginia and globally, and how, as we initiate new clinical activities, that we can study our outcomes in a scholarly way. Seems like a lot, but we're already doing a lot of that. We just haven't identified it at times. My wife, Penny, the first time she went to Malawi and worked there for any period of time in 2004, heard this quote on the BBC radio, which is her only source of entertainment for almost 2 months. And when spider webs unite, they can tie up a lion. And I thought that was a nice little way to start this, because individually we all are running around doing things, but when we start working together, we can really tackle bigger problems and solve them together. So starting out, what's a scientific research team? There are lots of folks who are working individually on scientific or medical problems, and I'm going to use science and medicine kind of interchangeably. And so we have the individual investigators all the way through to large integrated research teams. Thinking of it as a continuum, getting past the individual, there are multidisciplinary teams, interdisciplinary teams, and transdisciplinary teams. And we have used those terms interchangeably in general, but what is a multidisciplinary team? Well, this is a kind of a group of folks. I actually thought about doing a little exercise where I took people and kind of lined them up in a big circle, and so multidisciplinary, they'd all be kind of standing around, doing their own thing, and then they focus on a project. Then interdisciplinary, they're starting to kind of hold hands and focus on that project. They're learning from each other and introducing new ideas. And then transdisciplinary, they're really working together, holding hands, and we start bringing in the stakeholders. Our stakeholders are typically, but not exclusively, our patients. It's problem-oriented, and at times we rotate who's in charge depending on what we're focused on. So what's team science? Transdisciplinary research is essentially team science. Each person contributes their unique expertise. They're working entirely outside of their own discipline. They want to work together to understand the complexities of the entire project, and they get outside. They have to get outside of their level of comfort and inform each other's work. They need to capture the complexity of the problem and create new intellectual spaces. Again, like I said, this gets kind of squishy, but it really, this is where we're talking about improving the health of communities. We can't do it individually. Everybody just can't work on it one at a time and maybe talk to each other every once in a while. We really have to form these teams and engage the beneficiaries and take a more global view of what we're doing. Just to restate that, it's a collaborative effort to address a scientific or a medical challenge. It leverages the strengths and expertise of professionals trained in many different fields. It's a coordinated team of investigators, and it's especially helpful when we're addressing complex social or medical problems. I believe that we can apply the principles of these principles as the research questions come up, and when we create solutions that address clinical needs. And everything I'm talking about came from one article and its many references. So it's integrated, interactive, collaborative, led by one or more scientists Again, researchers with a diverse background, different areas of expertise. We have common objectives, coordinated resources, and a shared agenda. So what are some things that we need to do to achieve this level in our care or our approach to caring for the communities we serve? Well, you have to have regular meetings, a defined vision, have the goals that are set, effective communications, encourage intellectual disagreement. Everybody doesn't just have to come on board and do what they're told. I highlighted trust. I'm involved right now in a couple of projects at Virginia Tech where we're at a standstill because we have lack of trust with one of our partners. You have to be willing to share data and share the credit. There needs to be a principal leader and at times co-leaders. If you're doing, I'm involved in an international project, and we can't have one team leader. We need to have the U.S. leader and the leader in Uganda, but we need to communicate and see ourselves as co-leaders. And we need to support leaders who emerge. We form these teams, and some of us who were fortunate to become professors recently need to be working with junior faculty, residents, medical students, and when they emerge, we need to support that emergence and leadership. So what are some elements of effective teams? Well, certainly effective leadership and management skills, self and other awareness, and I'm going to come back to that, trust, that will keep coming back to that, strategies to communicate with each other openly, have shared expectations, defined roles and responsibilities, have a shared vision, again, appropriate recognition and credit, promote disagreement while containing the conflict. And that can be tricky, but it's doable. I work a lot with engineers, and you know, sometimes the engineers, my friend Al, the mechanical engineer, when I first started working with him, he just said, you know, in engineering, we hit a button on this side and results come out on this side, and I can explain what happens in between mathematically. And but in medicine, you guys just kind of hit a button over here and something happens over here and you don't have a clue. And so I agreed to disagree, you know, that we maybe aren't as scientific as engineers, but we learn to work together. We have to learn each other's languages. And that's something I learned when I was working at the Carilion Biomedical Institute. I needed to learn the language of engineers, the language of business people, the language of medicine, and language of politicians. And it has to be fun. You know, if it's not fun, if you're not enjoying what you're doing, you won't be totally engaged in the science or whatever you're doing. If you're not looking forward to working with a team and its shared goals, it just is not going to work. All of what I'm saying is the ideal transdisciplinary or team science entity. So one of the things that they talk about a lot are self and team awareness. We need to understand for ourselves, how do we operate? How do we communicate? How do we manage conflict? What are the different personalities, especially when you start putting together large teams? How do you give and receive feedback? There are lots of different self-assessment tools that we use here at Carilion when we start talking about leadership styles and understanding when we're working with a team to assess these styles. But the bottom line is we can't just, go into these things and analyze ourselves so much that we can't get started. We do need to recognize that there are vast differences in the way that we think, how we feel, what our perception is among individuals. So in other words, my way or the highway doesn't work in doing team science or transdisciplinary research. So there are 4 stages of team development. Forming, the group is established with some key scientific ideas and a hypothesis, perhaps. So at that point, we're gathering the people. Then there is storming. We've gathered our people, and now we need to establish what our roles, responsibilities, how we're going to communicate. Individuals figure out how to work together, and with respectful disagreement that is valued and supported. We move on to norming, where we start to work together effectively and efficiently. Individuals develop trust, comfort, and the ability to rely on one another. Then we get down to the meat of the exercise, and that's performing. The team, we're a well-oiled machine. We work together with shared goals, and we have efficient conflict resolution strategies. So let's talk about forming. So we're putting together this group. So we identify potential participants and invite them to the table. This is a time where something has come up, and one way or another, we have a medical, let's just say a medical problem that we want to tackle. And everybody comes and says, okay, I have all my ideas. I've got great ideas about how we're going to do this. We have to figure out how we're going to be organized formally, and we have to figure out how we're going to pay for this if that's a necessity. We're building a team. We need to recognize and embrace diversity. Gender, race, age, nationality, ethnicity, religion all bring a different perspective to the table. We want to identify people who want to work together as a team. They need the attitudes and skills for working with others, be committed, willing to share data, have that self-awareness as to how they work in a team environment. Sometimes, and we see that when we start putting together teams. I was thinking as I was driving over this morning about where I've observed where teams don't work out so well. How many of you have kids in high school or college? Yeah, not as many as I thought, but how many of you, different question, how many of you in high school, college, med school worked on group projects? Just about, yeah, everybody. How many of you, when you worked on a group project, had everybody on your team working as a well-oiled machine? How many of you had that outlier that everybody just wanted to fire? Okay. So that's that self-awareness of someone. You invite somebody to the table who either through the process or they, in my experience, we invite students to participate in projects that we do at Virginia Tech, and I've observed as they, and it's not a requirement. A lot of times it's we got this cool thing that we want to work on, and a dozen students will show up and they start working on it, and a couple months later 5 are left, and the rest have self-selected participate, and it's usually because they have some trouble with the way that teams work. When I interview students who want to work on projects with me, be it high school students or college students, a lot of times I'll say, one of my rules is you have to be able to work independently, because I can't be there all the time to tell you what to do, but you also have to be able to work as part of a team. And if you can't do those two things, it's probably not a good fit, and you're going to be frustrated trying to work on a project with me. And they'll self-select. Sometimes, every once in a while, we'll have one that self-selected to stick in there if they're unhappy. But there are ways, as we communicate when we're forming a team, that can help people decide if they want to be a part of it. And that's where that self-awareness really comes into play. So in forming a team, everybody asks the question, well, what's in it for me? What are the goals of the team, and what are my personal goals? For a lot of folks, they're looking at their career and what they want to do long term. And so does joining this team meet my aspirations and career needs? And my needs may be completely different than the needs of a medical student or resident. My needs are to, hopefully advance the success of the department, of the medical school, maybe some engineering at Virginia Tech, things like that, as opposed to a younger person who wants to establish himself as a leader and move up in their academic rank. I want to go from being an assistant professor to an associate professor, and so what's in it for me to advance my career? And then everybody asks their question, well, could I just do this on my own and not have to deal with this team? And so these are really challenges. Can I do it by myself? And then if I'm working with a big team, if I'm a superstar, will my accomplishments still get lost in the team science? So in storming, we have to, with a shared vision, determine individual expectations. What are the different folks going to do? What's their role? What are their responsibilities? How are we going to communicate? But this is the point where interdependence forms. And we have to be aware ourselves that we're losing some autonomy. I'm part of a team. I still want to keep my individual status. I'm not the only expert. If there are any turf battles, they need to be resolved. It's my lab, your lab. No, it's our lab. We need to learn the value that differences bring to a program to reduce the threat. And I think again, I've experienced that sometimes working with individuals in other disciplines, be it engineers, folks in the social sciences, other disciplines in medicine, that we all bring value, and we all have positive things that we bring to the table. I've observed a lot over the years. We still see that. It's the what I call the MD-PhD conflict. Who's more important? Well, I've got an MD, so obviously I've gone through 4 years of medical school, 3 years of residency, 3 years of fellowship training, and you've just got a PhD. You went through 4 years of college and a couple years of a master's and 3 or 4 years of a PhD, and you didn't do a residency and fellowship and all that kind of stuff, and so I've got to be superior, and that's really not true. And so we leave our credentials at the door when I'm working with teams. Scientific disagreement is valued, supported, and we don't want to jump to a conclusion right away. And in reflecting on that, we want to use evidence-based decisions versus emotional or individual opinions as to where we go. Dr. Dunsmore and I were in a meeting a couple weeks ago where we kind of jumped to a conclusion about, well, maybe she and I didn't, but individuals jumped to a conclusion that we could engage a community and do some educational things related to asthma by having a free dinner at a school. And everybody was going rah-rah until we talked to the head of the PTA who had tried to do that kind of thing to get folks to join the PTA. And so, you know, it's kind of a back-to-school night or sort of thing, and they offered a free spaghetti dinner with salad and drinks and dessert, and you'd pay $5 per family, and $3 of that would go to your PTA dues, and it was going to be, you know, it's going to be great. And 6 families showed up, and 3 of them were already members of the PTA. So, kind of we do that a lot in a lot of different ways. The next grand round, I think, is going to be in November, if not sooner. We're going to talk about community-based participatory research and design and things like that, and I think that's where we start learning about how we do these sorts of things. We don't have enough time today to talk about a lot of this, but that's an example of where we want to keep open minds and continue to look at evidence versus how we feel sometimes not the same thing. We need a shared vision, and someone has to start with a vision, and it can be from the person who put this together. It could come from a group discussion. Nancy Agee may say, I want you guys to tackle this or that or the other, and we do it because that's what the organization wants. Or a funding source may come and say, we would like for you to look at this, and that does happen. In storming, we have assembled our potential team, and we have our shared vision, and we start developing a research agenda based on goals and objectives. So the shared vision, that's the big picture. So we have to define the roles and responsibilities of individual members. How are we going to allocate resources? How are we going to coordinate our activities? And how are we going to put together all these pieces to create a larger whole? The individual understands where their contribution contributes to the end product. And so we start with a vision statement and objectives, and we adjust them as necessary. So we've all been involved at one point or another in vision statements, but, you know, what is it? You know, it's a description of what we're going to like to achieve or accomplish in the mid or long term, and it's supposed to serve as a clear guide for choosing our courses of action. And, you know, our vision statement, it should be concise, easy to be remembered, clear, have a definitive time horizon. You know, when are we going to start? When are we going to finish? This isn't going to go on forever. It's going to be where we're going and not where we are now. And it should be challenging and not something we can just say, okay, here's the vision and we'll be done, you know, in a couple weeks. And but general enough to really bring in everybody's interests, and in some way should inspire us to be involved in this. So then there's norming. We're working together. Let's get the work going. We have actions now with inputs and outputs. We're working together, learning each other's styles and abilities. And this is where I need to feel like I can trust you, I can rely on you, and I can relax around you. So trust. There are different levels of trust, and I just want to touch on those because, you know, we don't all have to be good buddies and friends to work together on a team. So identity-based trust, we understand at the highest level. We understand and appreciate each other's wants, desires, and values. We can act on behalf of the other person. Calculus-based, that's where I think a lot of us in working on teams, find ourselves. We know that the other person is going to keep their word, they're going to meet their deadlines, and fulfill expectations agreed upon. I referred earlier to some projects I'm working on where the calculus-based trust is gone, where deadlines are not met, they're not meeting the expectations as agreed upon. And then there's competence-based. We're confident in that individual's capabilities and skills. So trust, it's critical for team function and effectiveness. You have to be able to collaborate and be partners in decision-making. When you become mutually dependent, you have to lose some of your autonomy. You become dependent, and being dependent, you become vulnerable. And all of us, if we don't trust the other person, we're not going to really be open. We're going to start doing protective and defensive things to protect ourselves. But there are things that we do to proactively build trust. We explicitly spell out expectations. We're going to know up front how we're going to share data and materials. We know who's going to be doing what. We're going to understand how decisions are made. We're going to have a plan for conflict resolution, and we'll have policies and procedures that everybody follows. Then we get to performing. We're a well-oiled machine. We're working together with shared goals, efficient conflict resolution strategies, and doing this transdisciplinary work, and we have meaningful output. So what's critical to performing is credit. Everybody, I talked about what's in it for me. Everybody wants some credit, and it's the little things that can burn you, starting out at the very beginning. Authorship. Who's going to be, if we're going to publish something, who's going to be listed, as the first author, who's going to be the senior author, and who's going to be all the in-between things. The things that for advancement academically can be rather important. If there are going to be presentations, who gets to stand at the podium? I found engineers don't like to do that. I mean, not all engineers, but the ones I work with, they just say, you go give the talks. I don't want to stay back here. It's not in my DNA to get in front of audiences. TV and radio interviews. I'm not especially fond of doing those, but others are, and so we work that out. If media asks a question, who's going to answer it? If there's intellectual property or patent work involved, we have to be very clear how that's going to be handled, because now we're starting to talk about financial rewards beyond what you're doing. And an important, again, from what's in it for me, it's how am I going to promote the careers of junior colleagues and investigators. Communication. We need to periodically assess ourselves and have feedback. Routine checking in. And I found this interesting, again, as I was going through the slides yesterday, like we all do. Routine checking in. Vinny had mentioned that I was involved in the first Gulf War, and General Tommy Franks, who went on from, he was a one-star general when I met him, but he went on to be a four-star and in charge of U.S. forces in Afghanistan. And Tommy came to the officers that I worked with, and he handed out stacks of index cards. And he said, every day from now on until this war's over, you're going to take an index card, and on it you're going to write what went well today, what went wrong today, and what are you going to do to improve tomorrow. And that's a real good way of checking in, what's going well, what's not going well, and what are we going to change to improve. And we try to do that as individuals, and we can translate this to a lot of other things that we do in medicine, including just, routine clinic meetings. Conflict. We have to establish collaborative agreements. We need to have a plan for resolving conflict, and maybe in a large project have a governance committee. And again, in capital letters, trust. The more trust you have, the less conflict will arise. Okay, so I've kind of run through very quickly a little bit about team science. And again, there are books written on this now. But I wanted to do a little use case. So now I'm going to, of course, Dr. Hart steps out of the room in a minute. I want to invite so I was going through my emails a couple weeks ago, June 20th, 2018. Prevalence of obesity, 17.8% for youth in 2013 to 2016, significantly higher among non-metropolitan statistical areas. So Southwest Virginia. Probably 10 years ago, we took our first stab as a department at thinking about a research agenda. And I remember the meeting. I can't remember all the participants, but we sat around the table and we said, okay, we've got, I know it was me, Joelle Miller from Cardiology, Mike Hart from GI, Hannah Jaworski was still here, Don, you may, I can't, and others. And we said, okay, what is it that we all do in our individual disciplines that there may be an overarching issue in the communities we serve that we could tackle? And we arrived at childhood obesity as being something we all had in common. So that's where we want to start, childhood obesity, Southwest Virginia. So let's form a team. So I'm pretending I'm the guy that, I'm going to drive this team for the next few minutes. And so I look and say, okay, internally, we have the Carilion Children's Clinical Medicine. Externally, we have Virginia Tech and other community resources. And and this list is just, I generated this list based on the folks I asked to participate, and the list could be dozens of different areas. But adolescent medicine, cardiology, endocrine, GI, general peds, pulmonary, sleep medicine. Externally, we have Virginia Tech. Is Virginia Tech really external now? We are Virginia Tech. And I saw some of my colleagues at Virginia Tech yesterday, and we had a little interchange about we are us now, And, but, what do we have at Virginia Tech? Just off the top of my head that I listed, we have public health. We have an excellent public health group. Human nutrition, food, and exercise. When we start looking at developing apps and things like that, industrial design, engineering, computer science, psychology, it goes on and on. Virginia Foundation for Healthy Youth. That used to be, it came out of the tobacco settlement program, and for many years we did tobacco prevention programs, and 4 or 5 years ago it kind of flipped, and now it is focused on childhood obesity. And they still have that money in Richmond, and I'm a part of the regional board, and on a yearly basis we're giving out hundreds of thousands of dollars in communities in Southwest Virginia for obesity prevention work. So it's a resource that we've not tapped here, and in general they're not handing out resources to hospitals, but it's not out of the question, especially when you partner in communities. CHIP, Child Health Investment Partnership, Roanoke Valley, and the schools. We're talking about childhood obesity, and where are other places we can work. So I want to form a team. So I've asked Mike Hart, Erica Reynolds, Aaron Hokinson, Steve Harold, Kelly Henschel, and Joe Temez to join my team. So you guys, you can come on up. 15 minutes. So we're forming up, and our hypothesis is we will make an impact on the health of obese children in Southwest Virginia. Pretty lofty goal. I have my key participants, and are you a little bit excited about being asked to be a part of this team?
Maybe.
That's what I thought. So one of the first questions I have is, I'm forming this team. When you're forming a team, you have to work within the constraints of the Children's Hospital. So we have to, as we're putting this together, how are we going to do this? And one of the first questions, because we've had this discussion about other things, is, am I going to be permitted to set aside the time to do this and do this effectively? How are we going to pay for this? We don't know yet, but we'll have that discussion as we move on. I was looking at the team yesterday evening, and I kind of came up short on race, nationality, let's see, ethnicity. I don't know about religion. I didn't look into that, but at least I got the gender mix right, accidentally. And so if we were building a bigger team, we would want to think about that. Age, there's some younger ones and some older ones, seasoned folks. And I started thinking about it. If we were really making a team, maybe we would want to have some individuals from maybe some youth we're approaching. We want to care for youth. And again, we dream up all these ways how we're going to fix this, but we need to ask the beneficiary how to do that. So things like that. I didn't ask anybody. I just said, I want you to do this. How many, just out of curiosity, how many of you would want to be a part of a team if we put it together on childhood obesity? All right. I'm forcing you, Dr. Dunsmore's she's back there. Yeah. So again, and those are good questions because you want to be a part of the team. Okay, self-awareness. You work well with the team, and that's okay. When I was doing a Google search about, I wanted images for the talk, and I was searching Google images, and a thing came up. There was a guy who said, "This team science, I hate it. I don't want to do it. I'm going back to my lab. I just don't work well with others." And and there are some of us, and it's okay. Some of us just do not work well on a team. We work well individually. And as a team leader, I'd much rather know up front that you just don't want to work as part of a team, and then the next question is, will you commit? If given, okay, I'll do Steve's example. If given the appropriate environment within which to work, could you commit to operating on a team that is tackling childhood obesity? Everybody's shaking their head. It's a big commitment. Okay. Joe has the microphone. Okay. And
for the team.
Would you be willing to share data? I think so. Okay. And again, how aware of your capabilities of working in a team environment? Have you participated in other teams that have been successful. So, and then, okay, if you were on this team, what would, it's kind of hard to ask this on the spot, but what would be your goals? So we have the team goal, we're going to improve childhood obesity in Southwest Virginia, but as an individual, Joe, what would you want to get out of it for yourself?
If I were participating in a project like this, I'd want to know, first of all, what is the goal, and is it a goal that's in line with what I want to do? As physicians, as clinicians, I would want to see something improve for the patients that I serve. We've identified a problem, and I want to see that improve. So I want to know if I'm going to commit to a project, how much will I be able to participate, and how much will I see out of that? And then in doing that, defining what my responsibilities and commitment are to the project.
Okay. Erin?
Yeah, I would like to make sure that this is going to be a long-term project and not short-term, and that way we can see results, because obesity is not, treated or cured short-term.
Sure.
So,
Erica, we're going to go through this, and then we're going to come back and talk about some other things.
I think clearly we're not going to solve childhood obesity in the Roanoke area in our project, but I see these patients a lot and would like to have more things to offer my patients, more resources to offer them, and then just, my clinic is overwhelmed with a lot of patients who are being referred for obesity-related conditions that probably don't need to be in an endocrine clinic, and trying to figure out how to get those patients what they need instead of having them all referred to a subspecialist is one of my particular interests.
I have full professor envy. So I am doing this only to help myself achieve full professorship. Okay, no, just kidding. Number one, we need
she's not.
Kidding not. Number one, we need to really get with WIC and get rid of the juice on the WIC program, because all of our families still believe juice is a healthy beverage, and so they're drinking it by the gallon still. So all of my little toddlers that are 2 years old and 50 pounds are drinking a gallon of juice a day because WIC gives it to me. Number two, my teenagers don't have any place to go work out that's safe in their neighborhoods and available, so that we either need transportation, we need to work with our local gyms and Ys, whatever, to give them a place to help with that. And those are the things that I see on a daily basis that really tangle up my practice: juice and not good access for workouts or workout teams, or a nice fit kids program where we can get them together to continually learn about nutrition and exercise.
I'd like to thank everybody else for coming out tonight. I think I'm not really into doing the research and getting my name on stuff, but I think the point of this is that Carilion has a community presence with multiple fitness centers, multiple things throughout the community. We could make studies that set a goal, show an improvement, and then start policy initiatives throughout the county, throughout the area, where we provide places for kids to go. I mean, we've got all these fitness centers for us to go work out. We provide it for older folks with Parkinson's and cardiovascular rehab. Why don't we provide that for kids in the area? Why don't we partner with schools so that we show that the things improve their overall health, overall outcomes? We make those policies, and then those are gospel.
I just want to establish world peace. I think that I like Joe's.
Can I send you to the NATO summit?
Yeah, please. I'm off to the NATO summit after this conference. Well, I think the thing about this
an hour ago there was.
Joe's comment, I think, is spot on. I think that as clinicians, I think that's what pulls us together and drives it, is an outcome. You know, having done this before, I think the problem is you bite off more than you can chew, and then you end up making the team fail. I think if you don't have a part of the forming process, to me, is defining a measurable outcome that we can all live with. So two purposes. One is funding down the road, showing a true outcome. you know, why I said define world peace is it becomes so nebulous. I just want to make things, then if you can't measure it.
So that's in the storming where we establish our vision and our goals and objectives.
I agree, but I think that if you bite off, okay, so we're going to get a rack back wellness center on every street corner. I mean, some of these things are untenable, although desirable, and I think that that's where I think you need to never make, you know, perfect the enemy of good. I think that's part of this storming process.
Okay, so one of the things I'd asked you to think about before you came today was, and again, I picked 6 individuals. If I were doing this in a more, that was, Alex, this is Virginia Powell wanting to, saying she wished this was live streamed so they could comment. We'll get there, all right. So I asked you to, so I'm forming this team, and I've said, okay, I want to tackle childhood obesity, and I've picked these content experts, and we're at the table now. We're trying to form a team. What do you bring to the table related to childhood obesity? And everybody's from a different discipline, and so Mike has the mic. So what do you bring from the perspective of pediatric GI? What are you going to bring to the table?
Well, knowledge about metabolism and complications, comorbidity, and the outcomes of experience of diet, various other prior trials and other resources. We're all familiar. Every one of us, I'm familiar with how UVA structures theirs. This is a great problem because it oftentimes lacks the ability to find a natural home. It ends up in endocrine almost invariably, but most of the endocrinologists will say, gosh, really is it? What's exciting to me about this whole process, both from the internal and external, we have such fabulous resources. It's a huge problem, no pun intended, but it's such a fabulous resources, Virginia Tech too. It's a multidisciplinary. It's societal. It is every aspect of this.
So it is transdisciplinary?
Yeah, it is. And so that to me, my focus, I think that's what the beauty of this team science, and I like this project, is we look at it all from our own perspective, but we bring value to that. I mean, my perspective, and whether it's sleep apnea or, hyperlipidemia or other kinds of, that's where other people bring their own specialty interests and experiences.
Steve?
So my experience with preventative medicine is related to Georgia Prevention Institute, which has the Georgia Cardiovascular Twin Study, where they have 500 twin pairs, and they've built a lot of research looking at obesity, ethnicity, and individual measures, everywhere from LV mass to blood pressure response to stress, and they have 15 and now nearly 30-year follow-up on those twin pairs going back to 30 years ago. And so, where you have these models in place to look at, how these interventions can improve things. So I think, we have the ability to do objective measurements. So it's not just, nutrition and things like that, where we say we want to hit this calorie goal or hit this content or whatever, or you need 45 minutes of this particular type of exercise. I mean, we have measures of Doppler velocity flow and distal vasculature. We have measures of left ventricular mass. We talked about ambulatory blood pressure monitoring, which is different in obese kids versus adults. And so a lot of the data that looks at adult changes with obesity, it hasn't all been translated to the pediatric world. And so a lot of that still is needing to be done to make reliable models. And that can be done as a clinical science aspect, and then once you build those, then you can start using those as objective measurements for your interventions.
So I bring
Professor Henschel.
Right.
Testing out how that sounds.
Just testing. Yep. So I bring the much more simple general pediatrician's knowledge of how difficult it is to educate parents who themselves don't know how to eat and don't know how to live healthy to how to start healthy lifestyle for their kids, and how that dialogue really has to start at the first visit. And, some of our 4-month-olds are 20 pounds because they're eating all kinds of foods, and they're, you know, the comfort that they are knowing from 4 months old is being fed, because the parents don't have other calming skills. And so looking at this across the spectrum of the lifestyle, where those educational pieces really need to fit into the general peds office on a very daily basis. I also am the proud failure of a Fit Kids program back in Wilson, North Carolina, where I just didn't have enough buy-in from enough participants, and it ended up a me and the kids program. You know, the YMCA commitment was wavered as quickly as it started, and so learning how valuable the large team in the beginning is, because the number is going to call out, is real.
Thank you.
I certainly have lots of clinical experience with screening obese kids for obesity-related comorbidities and trying to work with a dietitian to do some lifestyle modifications. I'm not really a researcher, but I have participated in a couple of different obesity-related studies, both looking at obesity interventions for kids, and then also some research looking at trying to educate providers and increase screening. So probably learned some things from participating in those studies about what to do and not do. I don't have a lot of experience with working with community agencies and with advocacy, and I think that's probably where a lot of us feel like we need to go to have a big impact.
Our adolescent clinics, we have 2 sites in the city high schools, so that's a great opportunity to involve the schools in this, and also with the issue of like transportation and things, if we set up some type of fitness program at the school sites, worked with their dietary or cafeteria individuals like the dietitians there, perhaps we could make an improvement at the school sites too.
Think about as a clinician and as a specialist, what can I contribute? And really, 2 things is, one, we've made the observations, and physicians traditionally we're firemen that put out fires. We're dealing with a medical issue that's needed an intervention, and we've tried to focus on prevention and convincing your participants, your patients, to prevent is really something that I think, as far as pediatric obesity, we fail at. And so we have to, I think the first thing is we have to resolve that we're not going to be probably the primary effectors of change, but we can be the motivators for those who can help that change happen. And so having a reliable source for looking at the data, looking at the numbers of problems as they come, as children present to us, and being a reliable source of saying we can measure this outcome. And by using that measurement of the outcome, we can motivate those who can help us affect an intervention, which, you know, for this problem, like much preventative medicine on this scale, has to be done at the community level.
Okay, so we're about out of time, and the purpose of this, I really called it a forming exercise, but just to illustrate that in less than a half an hour, we were able to take 6 individuals and start talking about how we would form a team, what the individuals bring to the table, and that again, the purpose of team science is to create a whole that is greater than the individuals, and that it does take commitment and the ability to work as a team. And there are processes that have been studied and that are available. We kind of wandered from forming to storming pretty quickly, but that's okay. That's all I wanted to really present today. So this is another African proverb. I took this picture of this baobab tree, and then I went looking for something related to it. And knowledge is like a baobab tree. One person's arms cannot encompass it. And I would say team science, transdisciplinary research is the same, is that we all have to get our arms around it together to really make progress. And I'm hoping that as we go forward, we can have more discussions like this. Again, in less than a half an hour, we assembled 6 people who I did not let them talk to each other. I didn't give them a big agenda, and we sat at the table. And this is what can come from us working together as a team. Thanks.
Andy, that was fantastic, and I think that it really points out curiosity, right? It points out having an aspirational goal, trying to look at a problem and come to it with curiosity and skill sets and try to figure out how we can work together to solve a problem. And while I heard a couple of people say, we're not going to solve this problem, I would say to you that perhaps you can. And I say that because I've been working in team science for the past 25 years. Children's Oncology Group, the Cancer Collaborative, formed in 1970, and it had 3 groups, and they all came together in 2000. In 1970, childhood cancer, death from childhood cancer, was a predominance. The event-free survival was less than 50% for children. In 2018, it's 85% for all comers. And the way we were able to approach that, that's a huge problem. The way that we were able to do that is to have an aspirational goal, bring people together from all disciplines, scientists, statisticians, nurse clinicians, physicians, physician scientists, clinical trial specialists, geneticists, everybody that we could get, policymakers, the government, all together. This is how we were able to approach that problem and have some degree of, actually I would say a lot of success in being able to do that. So don't count yourself out when you think about what you can do coming together, bringing whole communities together, governments together, people like us together to work on a problem. Don't count yourself out.
We're over time, so if you need to leave, now's your chance, but here you go.
All right, thanks. Well, I've always, as far as this team dynamic stuff, I always thought people sort of had a knack for it or didn't. And I think part of the reason I think that is because I suck at it outside of my little world in the PICU. And I'm finding that trial and error is a really bad way to learn this because it wastes a lot of people's time. And I'd be interested in knowing, like, how you get better at this. I mean, in the business world, I think they have a lot of mentorship that goes, like, specifically toward this. And I don't know that we have those kind of resources for a lot of what we do here.
Sure. Is this mic still working? Okay. So I didn't study it in that depth, but I can tell you that there are ways of doing self-assessments and developing self-awareness and how one does think and operate, and then based on science, there are programs and methods that can be taught to permit people to work better in groups. And so I'd never say never. I think the mentoring and modeling is very important. You know, any surgeons in the room? Anyway, sometimes it's culture. You know, if you're raised in a culture of competitiveness and one-upsmanship and things like that, that's how you learn. Your behavior is modeled to operate that way. If you're, you know, pediatricians in general, we are much more collaborative than some of our colleagues because we're not climbing all over each other to, you know, be the chief resident and get the most cases and some other things that you see in other medical disciplines. But I think, but the fact that, Randy, that you say, I don't work well in teams, we'd say, okay, you know, maybe you shouldn't be in this particular team, but we could certainly use your expertise and count on you as a consultant on a specific topic. There are lots of ways to utilize the talents of individuals who just don't work well in groups, but we can use their expertise. And sometimes it takes saying, okay, what's in it for Randy? Okay? this is what I need from Randy. What can I offer to him to make it worth his while? And that's, that can be a challenge, but it's not insurmountable. And so I think there are strategies for.
It's less about being a participant or the leader, establishing it and control.
Sure.
It makes me wonder if there are people who do that as a career. I'm going to be a person who develops teams, not necessarily any one project, but how to together and keep them motivated.
Absolutely. My first real experience with this sort of thing was 25 years ago or longer when we looked at the top 10 DRGs that we felt like we could address and reduce costs here at Carilion. And they brought in external consultants who helped us form our teams and then work as teams to process map how we were doing things, come up with solutions. And so there's certainly professionals who do that, and it all depends on what you want to tackle and sometimes how many resources you have to apply to that. I would just say, based on just this experience this morning, we could at least try to start understanding what the challenges are in the community and strategize what could we do, what could we not do. Providing gym memberships, maybe not, but could we go to a school and tackle it one school at a time here in Roanoke? I think we can do that. We're doing that with asthma, and I think the asthma is just a use case of how we approach other problems that kids in our communities have. I think we really need to shut down. Thank you very much.
If you're still on the line, we apologize we didn't have a chance to open the phones, but you can always email us at outreach@carillionclinic.org, and I can get them to Dr. Muelenaer if you have questions or comments. With that, we're going to disconnect the phone lines now. Thank you all very much for joining us.